How old farmers always pick the sweetest cantaloupe. 5 farmstead tricks worth knowing. You think you know what you are looking for when you walk up to a melon bin. A certain color, a certain feel, maybe a smell. But farmers' wives from 50 years ago were not looking for what you are looking for. They were testing something else entirely, something you have never been taught, something that changes which melon you take home every single time. And I am going to show you the real reason their cantaloupes tasted like candy, while yours taste like water. Stay with me, because at the end of this video, I am going to tell you the single test that old-time growers use that nobody teaches anymore, and it is not the one you expect. If you have ever grown cantaloupes in your own garden, you know something that grocery store shoppers do not. You know the exact day, the exact hour sometimes when a melon is ready. You can feel it in how it sits in your palm. You can hear it when you tap the side. You watched it from the moment the flower fell off and the tiny green ball started to swell on the vine. You know. But once that melon leaves your garden and gets packed into a truck and shipped 2,000 miles and stacked in a bin next to 100 others, that knowledge is gone. Or is it? The old farmers, and I mean the ones who actually grew melons for market, not the tourists at the roadside stand, they figured out that you could still know, even with the melon picked 3 days prior, even with the skin changed by travel and handling. They developed 5 small, concrete tests that took less than 1 minute, and they worked every single time. Before I walk you through those 5 tests, I need to tell you something important. This channel exists because there is a whole body of knowledge about growing food the way American families grew it, the way that actually worked. And most of it cannot fit into a single video. So I have put all of it together, every principle and pattern and method behind picking melons, growing them, saving their seeds, everything, into a guide. It is in the description, it is in the pinned comment. That guide is where you go if you want the deep version, the why underneath the how. Everything I show you here today is real and it works, but the guide is where the full picture lives. Now, the reason those old-time growers could pick the sweetest melon every single time comes down to one thing that most gardeners today completely miss. You have been taught to look for ripeness, surface-level ripeness, color, firmness, maybe smell. Those things matter. But what the farmers actually understood was this: by the time a melon gets to the grocery store, all the ones that look roughly ripe to the untrained eye have already sat in the same bin for the same amount of time. So color and firmness have converged. They all look the same. The real test was something older. Something the vine tells you if you know how to listen. Here is what I mean. When you grow melons at home, you learn that the sweetest ones are not necessarily the biggest ones. The biggest ones are often the last to come off the vine, because they have spent the most time growing larger, not denser. The sweetest ones, the ones that taste like they have sugar running through them, those ones have a different density. They feel heavier for their size, tighter, more compact. That density is not something you see, it is something you feel. But here is where most home gardeners stop. They think, well, I cannot test that in a grocery store. Yes, you can. And the old farmers did, every time. What they knew was that melon density follows a pattern. The 5 tests they used were not 5 separate tricks. They were 5 ways of reading the same story. The story of whether this melon spent enough time on the vine becoming dense and sweet, or whether it came off too early and is still mostly water and air. My grandfather kept notebooks about the melons he grew, detailed ones. Not just what he planted, but which plants produced the sweetest fruit, and he had noticed something that stuck with me. The very sweetest cantaloupes, the ones that made my grandmother say she did not need sugar for anything else that day because the melon was enough. Those ones always had one thing in common. They had come off the vine a certain way, not forced, not picked early because the farmer needed the space or needed the harvest. They had simply fallen off on their own, or they detached with almost no pressure at all. The skin had changed color, yes. The density was there, yes. But the moment of harvest was different. I am going to teach you how to read that moment in a melon that was picked days ago. You will walk into a grocery store, do these 5 tests in about 45 seconds, and you will know which melon was treated like a mature fruit and which one was picked impatient. And I promise you, once you see it, you will never pick a watery cantaloupe again. The first test is one most people know but do not actually do correctly. It is about the color, but not for the reason you think. Part 1 ends here. Continue to Part 2. Most people look at a cantaloupe and stop at what they see. Green means unripe. Tan means ripe. They pick it and move on. But what the old farmers understood was that color tells you something much more specific than just ripe or not ripe. It tells you how long the melon sat on the vine before someone cut it. A cantaloupe that ripens all the way is not a uniform color. The side that faced the sun will be deeper. The underside, the part that rested on the soil, will be lighter, almost cream-colored or pale gold. If you pick up a melon and the entire rind is the same shade of tan all the way around, that melon was turned during growth. It was moved and rotated either by hand or by wind, so that all sides got equal sun exposure. That usually means it came from a commercial operation where someone handled it. The melon your grandmother would have chosen had an asymmetrical color. Darker on one side, lighter on the other. That asymmetry told her it grew in one spot, undisturbed, for weeks at a time. It ripened at its own pace. Nobody moved it. The second test is the netting. This is where most people go wrong. They feel the netting and assume that deep raised netting means a riper melon. It does not. The netting tells you something different. It tells you about variety. There are two kinds of cantaloupe you see in American stores. The Western cantaloupe is rounder, more uniform, with a finer, more delicate netting. The Eastern cantaloupe, sometimes called a muskmelon, is uglier, more oblong, with raised, thicker netting that looks almost rope-like. Both can be sweet. Neither one is automatically better, but the netting is a fingerprint. It identifies which type you are looking at. What matters is not how deep the netting is, but how consistent it is. A cantaloupe where the netting is intact all the way across the skin ripened properly on the vine. A cantaloupe where the netting is cracked, flaking, or torn in patches was stressed. Maybe there was too much rain. Maybe it was picked too soon and the netting was still breaking down. A smooth, unbroken net pattern, whether fine or rough, means the melon had a calm, steady ripening. Run your thumb across the netting. It should feel like rope or like leather, depending on the type. It should not flake, it should not be soft. If it crumbles under your touch, that melon has sat too long. Put it back. Before we continue with the third test, I want you to know something that changes how you think about picking a good melon. All of this, the color, the netting, the stem, everything I am about to tell you, these are not secrets. They are not hidden knowledge. They are simply forgotten. Your great-grandmother knew them the way you know how to tie your shoes. But somewhere between her kitchen and yours, the skill got lost. If you want to understand why this knowledge disappeared and what it means for the food you grow and buy, I have put together a detailed guide on the complete history of American melon-growing seed varieties that held flavor and how commercial farming changed the way we pick and eat melons. It is available in the description and pinned in the comments. It goes much deeper into the signals your body should be reading, and it includes a chart so you can identify melon varieties at the store. That guide is where the full picture lives. The third test is the stem. This is the one that separates someone who knows from someone who is guessing. Look at where the stem was attached. On a ripe cantaloupe, the stem has already separated from the melon. You will see a small circular scar, smooth and slightly indented, where the stem used to be. That scar should be clean, dry. It should look like the melon simply let go of the stem when it was ready. A truly ripe cantaloupe will sometimes have the stem missing entirely, fallen off in the field or during handling. That is actually a good sign. An unripe melon still has the stem attached. Or if the stem is gone, the scar is still green, still wet looking, still raw. When you see that, the melon was torn from the vine before its time. The flesh inside will disappoint you. There is a small detail here that matters more than most people realize. Feel the scar with your thumb. A ripe cantaloupe stem scar will feel slightly concave, like the melon is pulling inward just a touch. That little dip tells you the fruit has already begun the process of curing on the inside. The sugars have concentrated. The starches have converted. This is the melon that was allowed to finish its work. Now, the fourth test. Weight. You might think weight does not matter much. You would be wrong. Pick up 2 cantaloupes of roughly the same size. Hold one in each hand. The heavier one, genuinely heavier, not just slightly. That is your melon. A dense cantaloupe means the flesh is full of juice and sugar. A light one means it has been picked early and has spent time in storage drying out. Your hand knows the difference immediately. This is the test that separates the farmer's daughters from everyone else. They learn to feel the weight first, before they ever looked at the color or the stem. An older woman at a farmer's market will often pick up a melon, feel its weight for exactly 2 seconds, nod once, and put it in her basket. She does not need the other tests. She already knows. But here is what makes weight tricky. A cantaloupe that has been sitting in a warm grocery store for 3 days will feel heavier than one that arrived that morning, because it has absorbed some moisture from the air. So weight matters most when you are comparing two melons that have been stored under the same conditions. At a farmer's market where the melons arrived yesterday, at a roadside stand, or in your own garden, where you know exactly how long they have been sitting. The fifth test is the smell, and frankly, this is where most people get lost, because they do not know what to smell for. Before I tell you what to listen for, smell for, before I explain what the scent should tell you, I need to make sure you understand something about cantaloupe varieties and how that affects what your nose should expect. The western cantaloupe, the uniform ones from California, they have a faint aroma, clean, almost neutral. When they are ripe, you get a soft, subtle sweetness, not the heavy musk you remember from an older melon. Do not expect that deep, almost spicy melon smell. It is not coming. Smell for something lighter, a gentle sweetness that is definitely there but does not announce itself. The eastern cantaloupe, the muskmelon, that is different entirely. That one has a deeper, more pronounced scent. When it is ripe, the aroma is rich and slightly musky, not floral, not perfume-like. It smells like a warm melon, like concentrated fruit, like memory. You will smell it from a few inches away if the melon is truly ripe. You do not have to press your nose against the rind. An unripe cantaloupe of either type has almost no smell, or the smell is green. Vegetal, like you are smelling the plant itself, not the fruit. That is your signal that you are holding an early picked melon. Here is the thing about all 5 of these tests. They take less than 1 minute if you do them together. Color of the rind under the netting. Condition of the stem scar, weight in your hands, smell from a few inches away, and the netting itself, which should be raised and pronounced, not flat and faint. You can do all of this standing in front of a bin at the grocery store. You do not need special knowledge. You do not need equipment. You need only to pay attention to what your senses are already telling you. Most people skip these tests because it feels strange. It feels like too much work. It feels like you are supposed to just know somehow, and if you do not know, you failed. That is not how this works. Your grandmother did not inherit the ability to pick a sweet melon. She learned it. She practiced it. She did it every time she bought fruit, until it became as automatic as breathing. Before we continue, I need you to understand something that changes how you think about this whole process. The reason your grandmother could walk into a produce stand and select a perfect melon without hesitation is not because she had some gift. It is because she treated fruit selection the same way she treated every other skill on the farm. She developed it through repetition, through attention, through small failures that taught her what to notice next time. This is exactly why so many people feel lost in the grocery store now. We have been told that food just comes to us. We pick by appearance alone, because that is what the display encourages. We accept whatever we get because the alternative feels like too much trouble. But the moment you understand that picking a good cantaloupe is a learnable skill, not a mystery, the entire experience shifts. Let me show you what happens when you ignore these 5 tests and what happens when you apply them. The melon on the left here is the one people bring home by accident. They grabbed it because it was the right shape. Maybe it smelled okay from 6 feet away, but not close up. The stem scar is barely visible. The netting is there, but it is thin, almost apologetic. You cut into it at home and find pale flesh, thick white rind, and flavor that tastes like it was picked in a greenhouse under artificial light. Not poisonous, just disappointing. The melon on the right is the one the old farmers' wives would have selected every time. Same size, same price, but every single test confirms it. The netting stands up from the rind like rope work on a ship. You run your thumb over it and feel the raised pattern without any smooth valleys. The stem scar is deep and well-defined, almost like a small crater. The color underneath is that buttery tan you learn to recognize. When you hold it to your nose, the sweetness comes through immediately. Not floral, not perfumey, just clean melon fragrance that fills your nose. This melon you cut open and the flesh is that deep coral orange. The white between the flesh and the rind is thin, barely a quarter inch. The seeds are mature and brown, not pale and mushy. The first bite breaks cleanly, releases juice, and tastes exactly the way you remember cantaloupe tasting when you were young and thought all fruit was this good. Now here is what matters. These are not tricks. These are not secrets that require special talent or years of experience. These are 5 observable facts about a ripe melon that you can verify with your eyes, your hands, your nose, and your fingers. Every single one of them. Every single time. The same way your great-grandmother did it. The old way was to do this naturally, without thinking about it, because you had done it so many times it became automatic. But you can also learn it deliberately. You can write these 5 tests down on your phone if you need to. You can stand in front of the produce bin and check each one. You can compare 2 melons using these standards instead of guessing which one is prettier. Something I have found, having taught this method to dozens of people over the years, is that the skill actually comes faster than most expect. By the 3rd or 4th time you do all 5 tests, your hands and your nose start to develop what feels like intuition. You see the color, and before you even feel the weight, you somehow know. That is not magic. That is your nervous system learning to recognize a pattern. That is practice working. The advantage you have now, even in a modern grocery store, is that you get immediate feedback. You pick the melon, you take it home, you cut it open, you know within an hour whether you chose well. That feedback teaches you faster than anything else. A farmer's wife in 1950 might have made a poor choice once every 10 visits. You can compress that learning into 2 or 3 trips to the store if you are paying attention. What changes is your confidence. What changes is the quality of what your family eats. What changes is the small satisfaction of knowing that you walked into a store with uncertainty and walked out with the right fruit. That is not a small thing. That is a return to having agency over what comes into your kitchen. You know what the old farmers understood that we have largely forgotten? The act of choosing your food is not separate from growing it. It is part of the same skill set. A person who can read a cantaloupe at the market is a person who understands how that melon grew. They know what the vine needed. They know what the weather had to do. They know what ripeness actually means. Not as a calendar date or a color chart printed on the side of a bin, but as a physical reality you can feel and smell and see. This is the secret I promised you at the beginning. The 5 tests are not tricks. They are not shortcuts. They are the way a gardener reads the language of a mature fruit, and once you learn to read that language, you stop being a person who hopes you picked well. You become a person who knows. Your grandmother knew. The woman at the roadside stand knew. The farmer who grew the melon knew. All of them were reading the same signals. Color tells you about ripeness on the vine. Netting shows you the melon's work in developing its sugars. The stem tells you about the moment of separation. Weight and smell confirm everything else. These are not opinions. They are facts written into the flesh of the fruit itself. When you bring home a sweet cantaloupe, when you cut it open and the kitchen fills with that musky, honeyed smell, when your family eats it and actually finishes it instead of leaving half on their plates, you are not just eating a good melon. You are participating in something your relatives did without thinking. You are using knowledge that has been tested across generations and across millions of choices made in markets and on farms and in kitchens. The remarkable part is how fast this becomes automatic. The first cantaloupe, you think through all 5 tests. The second one, you remember most of them. By the 4th or 5th, your hand simply knows. You pick it up and something in you recognizes the weight. Your eye lands on the color and registers it instantly. Your nose catches the smell before you are even aware you are smelling. Your fingers feel the stem and somehow know whether it is the right kind of dry. That is not magic. That is not luck. That is the accumulation of small attention paid 5 or 6 times a month for a few weeks. That is the result of doing the work that people have always done when they cared about what they ate. So here is what I want you to do this week. Go to a grocery store or a farmer's market. Find the cantaloupe bin, pick one up, run it through all 5 tests. Take your time, notice what you see and feel and smell, then take it home and cut it open. Know what you chose. Learn from it. That single melon and the attention you give it is worth more than any amount of generic advice. Thank you for watching. If this method worked for you, or if you have a cantaloupe story of your own, I would genuinely like to hear it in the comments. Subscribe and tap that notification bell so you do not miss the next video. We will be talking about something equally practical and equally old, something that will change the way you think about what grows in your garden. Thank you.